If you're familiar with CSS classes and IDs, something about my last video probably really bothered you. We can create a style that affects all text blocks, but we can't create a style that just affects one text block, target a specific text block to be a specific appearance. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about with classes and IDs and CSS, you might check out my video on 288 on XHTML, CSS, div, span, class, and ID. But in order to affect just one text block, in fact there is a way in Xaml. You can use what's known as a name style, or more officially a static resource markup extension. Actually one of many static resource markup extensions. But rather than affecting all text blocks, we define a name for a named style and then reapply that name to only one specific text block. And the XAML equivalent of a class or ID is the x:key directive. This provides a value for any XAML property attribute by looking up a reference to an already defined resource, a static resource. And since this is a load time lookup, you have to define the resource before you physically reference it in the code. There's actually a way to make forward references that aren't yet defined, but that's a dynamic resource, which is a subject for another video. And the static resource has to be defined within the Windows.Resources section. And it's defined as x:key equals key name, as referenced in the code via attribute equals quotation mark curly brace static resource space key curly brace quotation mark. And as I say, it's often referred to as a name style. I think this will be a lot more clear when we look at an example. This is an example of text that is applied with a linear brush, linear gradient brush. And we actually derived this from our initial style. This is the initial style we defined in the previous video for a text block with horizontal alignment, font family, font size, and margin. And then in the second derived style, we used a based on attribute in the style, and then a curly brace static resource curly brace x:type text box curly brace quotation mark. And this in effect is a key, but a key that refers to a type rather than a key name. And then we have target type equals text block, and then we create our named style with the x:key name. And then we change various things and add things with the addition of the style. It's like cascading style sheets where the later ones overwrite the previous ones. And we use a setter property equals foreground complex element, and then a setter.values, a second complex property element. Then we have a linear gradient brush, which also is a complex element, and a linear gradient brush dot gradient stops, which is a complex element with a collection syntax. Then we have two gradient stops, and all this is defined within the setter.value, which is within the setter property equals foreground. So all this just affects the color property and overwrites the previous color property of the style this is based on. And then in order to reference this, down in the text block section, we have text block style equals quotation mark curly brace static resource name style name, which is title text, curly brace, and end quotation mark. And then we have a second text block which just takes on the default style since it doesn't reference the name style. And here we'd see the difference between the two in the designer view. So if we compile and run this, you'll see we get a really interesting looking title followed by a subtitle that just has the normal formatting. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a lot, and I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe.